Welcome to AstroChat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits, or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with a respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hey everybody, welcome back to another Astro Chat. Did you miss us last time? We had some technical editing issues, so we did not get a podcast up 2 weeks ago for the full moon in Libra, but we are back to talk about the upcoming eclipse and new moon, take 2, new moon in Aries. Welcome. You're joined today by myself, Kimberly Williams, and my cohort, Monica Anna. And so welcome. Couple of things on our intro. We're looking at, give you the data here real quick. We're looking at the new moon at 29 degrees of Aries, and it's happening here in Central Time Zone on April 19th at 10 p.m. And for those across the pond in Europe, you'll be experiencing it on April 20th. So wherever you live, convert it to your time zone and see where you're at. It's a little different than last month. Last month we had a whole lot of ingresses happening. This month we don't have as many. We do have some retrograde. We are going to see that, I think, whatever started last month, now it's a chance to really feel what that feels like, to get used to it. We, of course, have an eclipse we're going to have to talk about, our exciting eclipse in Aries. We're starting a new energy. We're moving out of, or at least starting to move away from, the Taurus and Scorpio axis and experience something new. So that should take up a bulk of our time. Of course, Mars is in its fall in Cancer, the ruler of this eclipse, so we'll look there. We're going to see Mercury go in retrograde, very close to Uranus. Exciting stuff. And Pluto will be going retrograde on the 1st, because we're looking at the 2-week window from now until the next eclipse, which will be May 5th. So we'll see that happen before we come together again. And some things we may not really go into in depth today, but still of note, Venus is transiting through Gemini. She started on the 11th of April and will be there until the 8th of May. And for the week of this eclipse, she's not aspected. Neither is her, I guess you'd say, the higher vibration is how I've heard it referred to, of Venus, which is Neptune, also unaspected, at least until we see some other planets pick up speed or retrograde back. So if 26 degrees of Pisces, which is where Neptune's at, is something significant in your chart, if Gemini is something significant in your chart and we don't mention it, you might want to take a peek at what those transits are doing. Before we jump in, just a little kind of check in. How you doing? I think, Monica, it's so exciting to have you back. You haven't been with us for a month. How have you been?
I'm really good. I was just saying to you earlier that it just feels like the holidays that I was on. I clicked a reset button on, and I'm still trying to reboot. You know, when you just press that button on your computer, and still all the software and all the programs that you're using still kicking in, and it takes a few minutes. I still feel that lag. I still feel that. But it's been wonderful break. But I do miss recording. I do miss the podcast. So it's great to be back here.
Oh, and we miss you when you're not here. I'm going to speak for
Thank
Anne.
you.
Anne cannot be with us today, but hopefully she will be with us when we journey up in 2 weeks and are on the other side of the eclipse and can give us some info on how it's been for her. I'm hanging out in San Antonio. The weather is beautiful. It is spring. The flowers are blooming, and my allergies are a mess. So apologies in advance if I get spacey, or if I'm sniffing too much, I will do my best not to. But that's life. I guess wherever we live, we have allergies, but we always
Yeah.
joke here in Texas that we have the worst. We have the biggest, we have the baddest. All right, well, let's
Of
dive
course.
in. Let's
Yeah.
dive in.
So
Take it away, Monica.
another new moon in Aries. It just feels like there's one that you recorded with Anna, and I needed to talk about Aries as well. So, hey, here it is. I can record one as well. So I don't feel like I've missed anything. But it's interesting because this new moon in Aries, I'm not going to repeat too much of what Aries is because, you've already explained that in a previous podcast. But it's interesting that the previous new moon was at the beginning of the sign. So Sun just entered the sign of Aries, and we had very early new moon there. So I believe it was 0 or 1 degree
Yeah, 0.
of Aries, the new moon, 0 degrees. And this one, this new moon happens at the time when Sun is just about to leave Aries. I mean, Kimberly, you calculated that Sun will move to the sign of Taurus, will leave Aries in the next few hours, straight after this.
4 hours, yeah.
4 hours,
The
yeah,
moon
straight
within a half
after.
hour.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
they're hanging out. They literally, if they were in a house, they're already at the door. They're saying goodbye. The 1 feet is just straight, at the door. They're still saying goodbyes and, unlocking the car, with their car key because they're out. But they all, this new moon, I feel like invites us to have a look at the whole cycle. We set up some intentions. The new moon is great to set up some intentions to start things, to review. Again, Aries invites us to see, where are we bold, where are we courageous, or where should we be, which area of life needs that fire in our lives, and how we deal with that. But this new moon comes in at the 29 degree, and 29 degree in astrology is called anaretic degree. It's one of those degrees. I always think about it as a degree of the final exam. So, in UK here, you'll have your A levels. I don't know what are the kind of difficult exams back in US. In Poland, you might have matura, or you might have like study exams to enter into uni. But this is the exam that checks, what have you learned? Like, you've studied for 4 years in high school, for 3 years in college, or whatever it is, and how much knowledge you really gathered. So the 29 degree of any sign, if you have any significant planet there, it just basically takes a stock of the whole thing. So you've been through that journey, technically, through all the 29 degrees of that sign. So if you experience everything that the sign can offer, and if you've been listening to us for a while, or you've dived into astrology for a while, you know that those signs are not one-dimensional. There are so many ways of exploring and encountering that theme, that archetype, that energy in your life, that it's really difficult to capture that in a short description, which is probably why we always talk so much during those podcasts, because there's just so much to say. And when you go through the journey of that sign, at the end, it's like a checkup. What have you learned? What that energy really means to you? Have you really embodied and understood what Aries stands for? On any level, in the level of your body, your emotions, your spirit. And this new moon kind of invites us. Yes, it's a new moon. Yes, it's about setting intention. But because it's also an eclipse, it feels like that portal that says, okay, Aries is important. We have Jupiter there as well. Aries energy seems to be super important in the sky. The universe is highlighting that to us twice. It gives us another opportunity. Okay, hey, oi, if you haven't had a chance to learn about your courage, you have another chance. You had a whole whole month of understanding the Aries energy. And if you hesitated, if you played a bit too much Libra, if you play a bit too diplomatic, I'm not quite sure, I don't want to upset, my parents, my boss, my partner, my this. If you had that, you have another opportunity, which doesn't happen often. Those new moons, Kimberly, you mentioned earlier, the astrological blue moons, they don't happen that often.
So this new moon, it's yet another opportunity that universe gives you, and kind of gives you that push, like, oi, be courageous, be inventive, be pioneering, be intuitive, and just go with your gut and just go for it. Just say yes. Jupiter there as well. Just say yes. Just say yes, and we'll figure it out later. Like, don't think about consequences. Don't think about, like, that. That's the energy. Like, let's not think about it. Let's just say yes. And now we have also an eclipse portal opening. So this is also the energy that opens a whole new eclipse season for us. So we're moving away from the Taurus and Scorpio eclipse, which we've been talking for a long time. A lot of episodes we spent talking about that energy, and now we're moving into Aries Libra opposition and polarity. So this new moon is really it's really opening the doors into something that feels, I don't use those words very often, but it feels fateful. And there are other things that we'll touch on in this chart that kind of feels like that. Kimberly and I, we had a little bit pre-recording catch-up, and what I've mentioned is this feels a little bit like that opening in Greek mythology when you had the gods descending and helping unravel the situation or fix the situation. I don't know if I'm not butchering the Latin, but the Deus ex machina, the kind of god out of nowhere coming in, sorting out the situation in the Greek tragedy. And that's the idea of something coming into your life out of the blue, out of that eclipse void, out of that 29 degree of, you've learned your lesson, and now that intuition, you can trust that intuition, you can trust that you understood that archetype, and you can allow that archetype to step into you and step into your life and help out. So it feels very as much as I love planning and vision boarding and setting up goals, this feels like allowing for that just pure, raw, fiery, inspirational, bold, courageous energy to enter and twist and change and challenge you. What do you think, Kimberly?
Oh, I love everything you're saying. I love it. I have so missed hearing your perspective on some of this stuff. I would agree with just about everything. And I will add to that, kind of backing up a little and unpacking. I think there's a lot of layers to this particular new moon. First, as you mentioned, here we go again. Aries new moon, second time in a row. That is really rare. And as we were talking earlier, I think it was Rick Levine was mentioning in his podcast that to have a new moon repeat, like, everybody knows the cycle. Each month you have a new moon in the sign of the sun, a full moon in the sign opposite. And the next month you go to the next pair, and then you go to the next pair. And then every once in a while, that cycle gets thrown out of whack. And it's rare. And so astrologically speaking, it's kind of like our version of a blue moon. We had a new moon in Aries at 0, and now we have it at 29. So the fact that we're having 2 in a row stands out to me as having some kind of significant meaning. And the fact that it's Aries, I think, adds to that meaning, because Aries is not a sign I associate with do it again, let's do it over. One of my very close Aries friends has literally a bumper sticker on her car that says, been there, done that, not going back for more. Because Aries is about going forward. Let's do it new. Let's start something up. We don't want to go back and repeat what we've done. So that kind of shifts for me the energy here a bit. There's a bit of restlessness, of unsettled, of am I still here? The universe might be pushing, or we might be pushing ourselves. Am I still here? Wasn't I here a month ago? How come we're not moving forward? The other thing that stands out for me is, and I think you had said when we were talking before we began, it's almost like the alpha and the omega, because we started at 0 Aries and now we're having a new moon that's at 29 Aries. And that feels really appropriate, but just think about the fact that it's a new moon at the last degree of the sign. Think about that contradiction. A new moon isn't about taking action. New moons are about bringing the energy in, holding that energy within us, our unconscious kind of getting comfortable and absorbing as we're ready to bring it forward. The analogy is often like, the the seed that's been planted in the ground and it's doing all that work, but we don't see it yet, right? We often have to wait till a crescent phase a few days later before we see the moon. So we may often have to wait a few days before we see the impact of that new moon. That's not Aries either. That is like totally not an Aries vibe. So I think there's a big restlessness and push, and I want to get out and I want to do it now, but why am I not doing it now? What is holding me back, or who is holding me back? And then there's the fact that it's at 29 degrees. Another layer here. 29 degrees, like you were saying, that's pretty significant. And 29 degrees of Aries, more so, right? 29 degrees of any sign is challenging. 28 and 29 degrees are ruled traditionally by Saturn and Mars, and I never remember which is which, but I know that I just put them together in my head that 28 and 29 degrees is rough, and 29 especially because it's that last degree of a sign, and it's Aries. Yeah, I'm ready to get out the door. Stop talking to me. Like you said, I got my coat on, the door's open. I'm ready to go to the next party. Why are you still talking to me? Is kind of how I envision the conversation going on here with the cosmos. So I kind of wonder, with it being at 29, is there going to be some type of existential crisis? Is there something happening that feels more crisis driven, the push that it must happen now, kind of like a bottle of champagne that we've been shaking and it's time to just pull that cork and to hell with the consequences and where it goes? Or as I was sharing with you, I think there's something here with it being Aries where, and it repeating and at this degree, if you kind of add all those factors together, is it possible we are being asked to really look at who I am? I mean, Aries is I am energy. That's its motto. So if we go back to basics, who am I? And at 0 degrees, oh, I'm the person that's going to rush into spring and I have all these plans and we're going to start things up and I'm ready to go, even if it means I'm going to go and forget to hit the record button on the podcast like I did, but we're ready to go. Zoom, zoom, zoom. And now we're at 29 degrees. I was ready to go. Why didn't I go? What's holding me back? And so I heard somebody mention it, like figuring out who you are means looking at who you have been, appreciating how that has led you, impacted you to who you are now, but also letting go, because that's not who I am anymore. And so in my head, I just keep thinking like this is a cosmic facial peel. I'm looking in the mirror and I know who I am. I see me. I do the peel. And when I rip that off, I still see me, but there's all the dead stuff that I'm not going to carry anymore. And that's how I feel about this lunation. Like unconsciously, there's something big that we get to process about, well, yeah, there might be reasons that we didn't get to take off running during this past month like we wanted to. And we could have a whole list of reasons. But the bottom line is, am I running forward as the person I am now? Or am I doing something else? So I guess that's kind of my take on this idea of getting to do Aries twice.
I mean, it's so also eclipse season as well. Everything that you said, we're going into the eclipse season that will be in Aries and Libra, which is on that polarity, me versus other, on me and other instead of versus, right? So who am I as a person? And what am I, or who am I in relationship? I mean, so many people will say that I'm so different when I'm in relationship. And I'm sure, we've all experienced this friend who, as soon as they get into a serious relationship, they change, they merge with that person, they change their habits, what they do, how they act. And this is the polarity that talks about it, like how much of me I need to preserve, and how much of that is selfishness that I need to, kind of compromise to be with the other, to make room for the other. But that balance, it's always really important in any relationship, whether it's a love relationship, whether it's, friendship, or whether it's a business partnership. If we are, too selfish and it's all about me and what I receive and what I get from this relationship, and the 29 degree of Aries can be very much like that, right? Like, okay, so, it's me, myself, and I. well, no one wants to be with that person. And then you wonder, it's like, well, why? Yes, I am, I am bold, I am courageous, I am all this stuff. And also I'm very, very alone.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, that's great. But can you put that courage into vulnerability? Can you put that, that fire into being inspirational, but not alienating? And we're opening this new moon. Like it's difficult to talk about this new moon at 29 degrees without talking about the eclipse as well. And we're going into that eclipse season, are we? And we're starting with the Aries, not with Libra. We're starting with Aries. So again, like going back to what you just said, I'm like, yes, 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 we're starting with, I need to know who I am before I go into relationship. Interesting enough, before we started recording, I haven't told you that yet. Before we started recording, I got a message from my girlfriend asking me about, oh, do you know anything about astrology compatibility and how compatible is this sign and this sign? And I was like, we're going into this eclipse season. There will be more questions like that, which is interesting. How compatible are we? And my answer actually was, well, we are very compatible if we know ourselves, like the whole idea of know thyself. If I know what I need, what drives me, what my values are, what is my sex drive, what are my structure, what are my boundaries that I'm not going to get pushed, what triggers me, what trauma do I still have to heal, but I know it's sensitive point. If I understand all that about me, I am better equipped in getting into relationship because I'm not getting triggered, because I'm not getting pushed, because I'm not going to shave things for another person. If I don't know all that, no one will be compatible because everyone will be just either my own projection onto them, or they will be triggering all the stuff within me. It's like, why is this happening to me again? It's interesting, again, going back to that second new moon, the alpha and omega, the opening and the closing that you said. It's like, how often do we say when it comes to relationship, oh, why is this happening to me again? Why am I picking the wrong girl or the wrong boy or the wrong person, for me? Well, sometimes, you are the common denominator. You need to look at yourself and it's like, okay, why am I being attracted to those people? Why am I allowing them in my life? What is it about them that I am drawn to? And where is what are my boundaries? What are my red flags? I have another girlfriend that sent me this meme, which I absolutely adore. She said, oh, I saw the red flags and I thought it was a party or a festival. And I think that this new moon and this eclipse season start with that kick.
Yeah.
Like Kimberly, like you said, what are you willing to give up? Who you are that is not authentic, so you can strip into this is who I am. But also understanding that who you are at your core is beautiful and is desirable. And it can be part of a relationship, but you need to stay individual in relationship as well. When you start to merge too much, you lose yourself.
Mm-hmm. And that just makes me think about, I'm sorry, I hope I'm not overstepping or interrupting.
No.
Okay.
No.
So that makes me think too about the flip side, right? How often are we looking at a chart and talking to somebody who has a preponderance of Libra energy and is so focused on making it about others? Or we have childhood trauma that has stopped us from making it about ourselves. Or, the list goes on of things that encourage us to maybe avoid embracing that inner Aries energy. If that happens to be, a pattern that you fall into, get tied on, because this is I need to embrace me. I need to embrace I am. I need to know who I am before I go forward. And it could be in relationship, it could be in business. I mean, they talk a lot about before you start hanging your shingle and doing your Facebook page, you need to think about what is your message, think about your branding. Who are you? What is the message you want to get out there? So this is like everywhere in life that we step out of ourself. We have to know who ourself is first. And if we don't, if we're so focused on what others need and how I can fill that need, and we're not really thinking about me, enough, we're just going to attract the opposite, right? We're going to attract people who are so into the I am that they've become unhealthy in the other extreme. That, we might be attracting the narcissists and those who are all too happy for us to make it about them, as it were. So this could be a shake-up time where we're having to bring some balance back to this. Oh, am I making it about me enough? And then am I bringing me forward into my work and into my relationships and into the world? And if things haven't taken off in the last lunar month, maybe it's because I'm not bringing enough of me to the table. Maybe. It's a question, not an assumption. So
I love how we bounce off things today, because what you reminded me as well just now, Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars that has that kind of 2-year cycle around the zodiac. And this is the sign and the planet that teaches us boundaries and teaches us no. The kind of, terrible twos. Like, no, do you want ice cream? No. It's not that I don't want it. It's I want to assert myself. And this is what Aries teaches us in relationship. It's that assertiveness. Yeah. What is it that I want in this relationship for me? And what is it that, I can give up because I care about the other? And how do I find that balance? But this new moon, and again, just to repeat, until I'm probably going to get tired, is the 29 degree, that very last degree, and that second opportunity. Have you learned this month to say no? And I think this is what I personally love about astrology. Things coming in cycles. Things come back, whether in 2 years' time, 8 years' time, 12 years' time. The universe keeps coming back with opportunities to revisit certain things. But also, it's like, for me, it's like a weather forecast. This is a good time to look into Aries and that archetype and your boundaries, and how do you say no, and how you assert yourself, and do you really know who you are at your core? Being courageous enough to step in and be that. For whatever reason, you might not have had opportunity to be that, whether it's upbringing, the relationship, the trauma, you might not have had chance, but universe keeps presenting us with that option. And the eclipse season will present that option again for the next couple years. And we looked at it, Kimberly, haven't we? So the previous eclipse cycle in those signs was between 2013 and 2016. And the one before that was 2004 and 2006. So have a look at those dates and see what was happening in your life around the Aries Libra axis, around your assertiveness, around your relationship, about who you are, what you want, how do you put your boundaries, how do you say no, even if it's tough to say no, how do you do relationships? And have a look at those dates and whether or not certain themes will be coming out, because this is the beauty of the cycles of astrology. Whatever happened there, chances are it will manifest again in your life. The same themes, the people from the past might come back, the situation from the past might come back, the themes will definitely come back. So this is really interesting new moon inviting us to do that.
Yeah, totally. And before we pull up the chart, just to kind of throw out too some more information about the fact it's an eclipse. So it's a solar eclipse, right? It's on the new moon. It is, solar eclipses are not so much about the endings as they are what needs to begin, which feels very Aries, right? So what needs to begin around myself? Maybe I'm fine just as I am and there's nothing old to get rid of, but it's time to start a new venture or a new chapter about me. Embrace a little self-discovery. What do we want to do? And where can you take action about developing the self? And interestingly, it's also happening while the nodes have not yet shifted into the Aries Libra. And we'll show this in clarity in a second when we bring up the chart. But, if I had to come up with a saying for this lunation, I'm like, it ain't over till the fat lady sings. You've got an Aries new moon following an Aries new moon. Oh, we have new eclipse signs. We have Aries and Libra, yay. But wait, the nodes are still in Taurus, Scorpio. So even though it is new energy, I look at it more as it's foreshadowing where I want to move forward, right? This is about my unconscious getting on board. This is about stepping into, in that very kind of internal way, stepping on board with where I want to be moving in the world. Like it's a solar eclipse, so we're looking at the world. How do I want to move in that world? It's interesting to me because of this fact that the nodes have not yet shifted. So it brings up what we've been dealing with the last 3 years around, and you, I'm sure, have recalled us saying over and over that while the nodes are in Taurus and Scorpio, challenges with power, with releasing fear, with what's going on with finances, embracing, productivity, and what's going on with supply and demand, and how all of that kind of juggles for us in the houses where these signs live in our natal chart. So, yeah, I'm ready to step forward and take some Aries action, and I have to find out how to do it in the midst of that outer world that hasn't quite changed.
Yeah. And it's not just a solar eclipse, isn't it? It's on the North Node. So I believe you do too, but I personally look at where the eclipse is happening. Is it close to the North Node or is it close to the South Node? And this one is actually close to the North Node, which means this one has that quality as well of that hunger, of going for something new. So again, however we want to look at it, whether it's from the nodal perspective to it all kind of fits within the same theme. What is your hunger? Like, what drives you? What is that metaphorical hunger? I'm not asking for your favorite food, but what is that metaphorical hunger that drives you as you? What is it that you can't live without? Like, this is me, my book writing is my passion, my medicine is my passion. Like, what is it that is truly your core? I love dancing, and I could not imagine a place where I couldn't move my body, because that's what I feel. What is your hunger? What do you do to satisfy it?
Yeah. And if that hunger has died, if you feel, a lot of people have been reporting, that they don't feel the renewal in the post-COVID world yet, that there's been too much to contend with, too much stress, too much loss, too much of something. I mean, we've been dealing with past up until just recently, we've been dealing with all the energy of Uranus squaring Saturn. Everything has been heavy, everything that has been huge. For a lot of folks, that has resulted in apathy or a loss of hunger. This is a great time to restart, to kickstart. What are you, as you said, what do you hunger for? And if you haven't been able to really connect with that passion, this might be that time to reignite that passion for life, that passion for what you want to do. Yeah. All right, let's pull up the chart so we can dive into it even more. All right, so here's our chart for the eclipse. Remember, we're just doing an Aries wheel. Set it to where you live and find out what kind of in the house system you use, and see what lands on the cusps for you. But in general, we've got a lot of aspects happening to the lunation, to the sun, the moon. It's interesting. It is a chart that doesn't have a whole lot of aspects all over like we've had in past months. The ones that are there are very focused, very kind of laser-like. And so if we're looking at the sun and the moon hanging out at 29 degrees of Aries, well, they are also conjunct Jupiter. Jupiter's at 23 degrees of Aries. We also have a really interesting square happening to Pluto. Pluto just recently moved into Aquarius, and so it's hanging out at 0 degrees Aquarius within. So there's a tight square out of sign, but within a half hour, the moon will have moved to 0 Aquarius and be making it exact square. And within 4 hours, the sun will have moved, making an exact square. So it's tight. No matter how you slice it, it's tight. We have a sextile to Saturn, which recently ingressed into Pisces. It's hanging out at 4 degrees of Pisces. And of course, because it's an eclipse, we see that it's conjunct the North Node, which is at 4 degrees of Taurus. Did I forget anything? There's a lot.
No, I think you covered the new moon pretty well.
So let's
Those are the
start off
main
with the
aspects.
energy that's right there. Let's start off with the conjunction to Jupiter because it's right there. Um, it's to me, the conjunction with Jupiter is like a double-edged sword. So we've talked about the energy of the sun, the moon, new moon, 29 degrees, Aries. We kind of got that, I think, down. And it's still Aries energy. It's about I'm ready to run forward. And Jupiter's job is to expand what it touches. So to give us more of a desire for this, to give us more confidence, to make us bolder, braver. We can do it, to bring, those things that are going to help us in achieving success. And because it's conjunct this lunation, and this lunation's an eclipse, that also means it's under the beams of the sun. You can't see it. When things get that close to the sun, you look up in the sky, you can't see it. And as the ancients would say, if I can't see it, I can't feel it. And we can argue that point from an astrology point of view, but that's the basic idea, is that if something is so close to the sun, the light and the heat of the sun blots it out. It becomes something that's happening more in an unconscious realm than a conscious realm. So we may yearn for the enthusiasm. We may have had the enthusiasm back when everything was at 0 degrees of Aries a month ago, but now it's like, where'd it go? I was ready to run forward, but now do we have doubt? Are we hesitant? What has happened? We thought we had things lined up. Maybe they aren't really happening with that synchronicity the way we wanted. There's that, there's one moment that's I think it's already passed, when you have that cazimi, right? When the sun and the planet are at the same degree, and that's kind of like the eye of the storm, when things can really shine bright, but we're not there now, right? Jupiter's at 23, the sun's at 29. They're at different degrees, but I feel like this is not a bad thing, but it can be a bit of a delay, a stall, which doesn't make us happy with all this Aries and 29 and repeat. It can feel like I'm stuck in the repeat loop, even though nothing's retrograde. You know what I mean? It's just that what is being expanded is what I don't see. So perhaps because it's a new moon, this is forcing us to not rely on what we see, but on what we feel. That's kind of the way I'm sitting with it. It's much more about trust the feelings and take action based on those feelings rather than what you see out in front of you.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. And Jupiter, like you said, Jupiter made things bigger and better. But it has the tendency to exaggerate as well. So it's like, are you really that good? Or you're just talking the good talk, whether it's in relationships, whether we are friends or at work, it's great to prop ourselves and say, do you know what? No, I'll be bold. I'll say as it is. Yes, I am really good at that. Yes, I am an expert at that. Yes, I'm really good mechanic. Yes, I'm amazing teacher. I mean, whatever it is. But Jupiter from that unconscious can how to say that, encourage us to grow a little bit like the balloon, and at some point all that can go out, because ultimately it's like, if you don't know where the boundary is, when you hit the boundary, that's where everything gets deflated, and that's your Saturn, that's your boundary. Someone will come in and say, no, you're not as good as you think you are, you're not, so this is what the Jupiter can do from the background, especially with the new moon. I was looking at it earlier, and if you're looking at our YouTube video, you can see that there's the whole kind of chain of the planets in Aries, starting with an asteroid with Chiron, which is ultimately the wounded healer, that wound in us, that it's kind of still there, that we're protecting, but it's still slipping, it's still hurting, it's still, whenever it's triggered, it still brings things up, and it starts the whole thing with Aries. So I did wonder, when we were chatting earlier, whether or not that Jupiter would exasperate that pain, would exasperate that, who am I? Oh my God, I lost myself. Whether I'm 20, 40, 60 or 80, have I lost myself? Have I
Mhm.
actually found, again, that's that alpha and omega, right, with the new moon and asking those questions in Aries, have I actually lost myself along the way because I became the lawyer, the mother, the, you know, the sister, the carer, whatever it is that I became? I lost my own identity. You know, I stepped into a role that was given to me or I picked, you know, and suddenly I lost who I was at my core because I didn't say no, because I didn't put the boundaries, because I let people and situations and, you know, everything else guide me to the point where I don't recognize myself anymore.
Yeah.
There might be that kind of hurt of, you know, where is my courage? Like, oh, you know, back in the day I was this, or back in the day I was that. Well, where is that? It's still at the core of you. And yes, if you're 40, 50, 60, 70, you know, you're not 15. You're not going to be playing football at the professional level, right? But that doesn't mean that you have to forget that key element that makes who you are, that passion that was there. How can you transform that passion? You know, Chiron, ultimately, for me, this is the place of our greatest hurt, but this is also the place of our greatest strength. If we can transmute that poison into healing. Every time I look at a Chiron in a chart, I think of the Rumi poem when, you know, when there's this line of, the wound is when the light enters you. And this is it, you know, in the area of life or in the archetype where we have that wounding, this is where we can deeply, deeply understand another and have that compassion. Because we've been through that pain, we've been through that journey, and we know the healing that we needed ourselves, and we can share that healings with others as well. And that Aries, for me, that Jupiter can exasperate that. It can feel like that wound and that hurt is immense.
Yeah.
You know, the bigger and better. Not necessarily, you know, Jupiter just makes things bigger. It doesn't care if it's, you know, bigger pile of poop or, you know, or a pile of gold at the
Right.
end of the rainbow. It just makes things bigger.
Yeah.
So, you know, for me, this is it. You know, we have that 29 degree of a sign for a reason. Let's have the courage and that bravery to initiate the move to fix that, or not fix, I don't like that word, to start that healing process. And Chiron will be there for a while. So it will be interesting because we'll be talking about Chiron in Aries for a while, as the eclipses will be triggering this point as well, and as the eclipses will be triggering this archetype. So it's a beautiful entry into that next 2 years. For me, it's a beautiful entry and invitation into, do you have courage to face that pain? Do you have courage to set healthy boundaries? You know, sometimes the courage it is to pick up a phone and find a therapist. You know, in some cultures, you know, it's still difficult to do that. We're talking so much about, you know, mental health, and very often the biggest problem is actually getting help, actually getting that first step. You know, talking
Yeah.
to someone, talking to your colleague that I'm not okay, or picking up the phone and saying, do you know what, I want someone to talk to, because something that happened to me last month, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's still hurting. And I'd like to look at that. But it takes courage. It takes that Aries courage to go and say, I want to look at that pain, because that pain prevents me from being me, prevents me from having a healthy relationship, prevents me from living life to the full.
Yeah. Another
If you
pain that
really
can,
look at, you know, again, with that Aries boldness at yourself. Oh, sorry, I think there was a bit of a time lag. If you have the courage to look at yourself and at your pain, you'll probably realize that it prevents you from really honestly connecting with others, and prevents you from living that life to the full. So can you use this energy and the next 2 years of eclipses, where the universe invites you to say, hey, look at that polarity and see what can you do to help yourself. And again, you know, this is a journey. Even universe tells us it's a journey. It will come back to the same point in a few years' time. It will revisit it. This is not something that you have to fix. This is not something that, it will be done in 3 months' time. This is a journey of healing and understanding, and also deepening your compassion.
Deepening compassion for the self too, which is often something that for many of us is lacking because of that Aries energy. And I like what you said about, like, the pain of not moving. And I'm thinking the pain of not moving forward, the pain of having to say no when I want to say yes. I think there's a big thing here about, do I say yes? And because Jupiter wants you to say yes to life. Aries, as you said, 2-year old, we learn to say no. We set our boundaries. So am I saying no when I want to say yes? Am I saying yes to life, but the universe is telling me no? I mean, how often are we ready to take a vacation and now there's a financial crisis, or we get laid off, or I'm ready to go on an adventure hike and now there's an injury and I got to have surgery? Or, I've heard this over and over the last 2-3 years about the external creating these obstacles, these very hard Saturnian obstacles of how do I overcome that? It's work, it's arduous. That doesn't feel like joy. It's like sometimes hard to convince ourselves I can say yes. And so I think that maybe some of the pain around, I've had to delay, I've had to wait, that felt like no, that felt like maybe, feels like is starting to turn into never. Is this a physical thing? Is it a financial thing? What house in your natal chart is where your Aries live? And where has that been a battleground between yes and no? Do you have to learn to say no, or is the universe telling you no, or others? And what do we need to balance there? And as you said, with Chiron, it's not easy to just see because it's painful. And it's deep-seated pain that probably taps into other pains. And I'll
I
talk
love
about that
that you
more
said
when we
that.
get to Mars.
I love that you said about this yes and no, because for me, that's always the question around the Aries and Libra axis. And I don't remember who said that to me a few years back, but I love that quote. If you say yes to something or someone, check with yourself that you're not saying no to yourself. So this is for me very
Yes.
Aries and the boundaries. If I say to someone, yes, I can help you with the homework. Yes, I can help you, learn for that test, or I can help you at work, or I can help you do the shopping. Is that actually affecting? And I'm saying no to myself, self with the, maybe capital S as well. Did I have plans? Did I had a self-care plan? Or, I was working on my business plan that evening when someone asked me. That kind of, balance. Yes, we have to be there for others, if we're in relationships, because that's what the relationships are, right? We are there for others and we build that. But if that becomes unbalanced and we're always there for the other and never for ourselves, how does that yes and no work on that axis? Do you say no to yourself way too often? So yeah,
Good point.
thank you that you mentioned that. I'll be probably talking yes and no now for the next 2 years with those eclipses.
I think
As
it's a
much as
good thing. Good thing to
yeah.
look at and revisit. And with it being conjunct the North Node, I don't think we have to go into that too much because we've been talking about the North Node in Taurus and the South Node in Scorpio since we began this podcast. So more of that. Go back and listen to others on eclipses if you want to know more. But I would say that since the North Node is in its final passage through Taurus, this means that on some level, what's going on with what I value about myself? And do I value myself as much as others or my job or money or whatever the other thing out there is? Like you said, there's that polarity of Aries and Libra to me is always the other. So what is the other? Is it a person? Is it a relationship? Is it an object? Is it clout? Is it status? Like, what is your other? For you, it's going to be different than maybe for me, but do I value myself as much as that? And if not, this could be saying this eclipse is really about getting in touch with deep personal self-valuation that I give myself and that I expect others to give me as well.
Yeah. And I like that you say, obviously, we're not going to go into the North Node because we've talked about it quite a lot. But for any listeners that has been with us for a while, it's pretty obvious that we're picking the chart aspects that we want to talk about. We think they're interesting and impactful. but very rare do we have a time and opportunity to talk about everything that's going on within the chart. So again, if you are interested at any point and we've missed something, please do put a comment. You know, we would love to hear the comment. We would love to engage. So if you do have an interest and say, well, actually, I'm not quite sure what the house means, or well, you never mention anything about Mars, please leave the comment. We will know what you're interested in, and we'll actually be able to respond and see, you know, what is that interests you as well.
Yeah.
Because we pick the stuff that we like. That's pretty clear, isn't it?
Yeah. But keep the conversation going. Let's keep chatting. As you said, put the comments below. And I will try to find the links to the last two that we did on the eclipse in Scorpio and the eclipse in Taurus. I'll put those in the link. So if that's something that you want to know more about, you can fast forward to where we talk about those nodes there and get some other points of view.
Yeah.
But how about moving into that that Saturn and that Scorpio, I'm sorry, the Saturn and the Pluto contacts. What are you thinking there?
Again, you know, we have a big boys that just changed their signs, just entered a new sign. Pluto entered Aquarius and will be there for the next 20 years. And Saturn entered Pisces and is going to be there for another couple years. So those are significant transits. So again, just a little tip, if you know your chart and know which house Aquarius and Pisces is, those are the houses that will be impacted. Those are the houses where that energy is moving into. So it's good to pay attention over the next few months to see what's coming up, especially around those areas of life for you, to see where that change is happening. Both of those big boys are actually involved in that new moon. So Pluto is squaring it, and Saturn is sextiling that new moon, and by default the nodal axis. So we have the god of time, the god of a restriction, the one that says no, you know, this is the boundary, this is as far as you can go, and the god of underworld, speaking to that new moon in Aries as well, and speaking to that eclipse as well. So I do find that it's interesting that other planets are not quite as involved as those two. They're creating the structure for this new moon. They're creating a change. And again, I think with both of them being in such a signs, and that new moon and the eclipse happening in Aries, there is the question for me around, if I know myself, if I really done that homework, like we said, on Aries, and I know myself and I know my boundaries, I know the structures that I need to develop my dream, the Saturn and Pisces. I know the structures that I need to support my spirituality, the meaning in my life. And I also am not afraid to dive into that power, into that depth, and into that underworld of revolution, of my community, of activism, of of my tribe. You know, I can go with that tribe deep and meaningful, and maybe bring up, you know, changes from the depth. But the key is, do I know myself? If I don't, the Saturn in Pisces will drown us, will create the illusion, will create the whole, when I'm thinking about Saturn in Pisces, you know, I'm thinking either about the temple, you know, the structure that we need for creating a sacred space, whether it's a structure like a church or a mosque or a synagogue, or a structure in your home where you have a beautiful altar and that's your sacred space. You're creating a structure to support, you know, your mystical experiences, to support that connection with the divine. But Saturn in Pisces, when it's going wrong, that's for me like when you go to a fair and you have that house of mirrors, you know, when
Yeah.
you go in and one is, and you don't know where the exit is, and it just all super confusing. And on one mirror you're too big, and another one you're too small, and then you're too, you know, too tall. And Saturn in Pisces, for me, when it goes wrong, it creates the structure that is so Neptunian, so foggy, and so distorted that we don't see that until Saturn will move away from Pisces. So that's the danger. But if you know yourself well and you go into that, you know, that house of mirrors, you know this is not reflection of you. So again, it goes back to that Aries. Have you done your homework? Because we're going into those Piscean waters with Saturn. Have you done your homework so you're not going to see that reflection and thinking, oh my God, do I look like this? And same with Pluto in Aquarius. That's a square. That's uncomfortable aspect. So again, Pluto is asking from that Aquarius, well, who you are, how do you support your community with who you are? What is it that your community is getting? You know, how do you use your power and your influence and your privilege to help your tribe, to transform your tribe? So,
Beautiful.
I mean, I can talk about it for a few more hours, but I think, yeah.
Yeah. No, I
I think
agree
no one would
too.
watch that episode.
I think it's very
5
much
hours
about
long.
the tribe. It's about the collective. Pluto in Aquarius. Aquarius to me is a sign that is totally about the collective, finding the people who think like me, the ideology that we share, that we hold. And so with it making a square, and a very tight square, I mean, it starts off, you know, less than a degree out of sign, and within a few hours, it's exact. As everything moves into Taurus, it becomes exact by sign. It is really impactful here. And I obviously I focus on natal charts, as you know, as we all do on this chat. But if I were to venture out and look at more mundane astrology, I'd say, you know, this says to me that there could be some type of uprising, some type of crisis happening on a world stage, on people in power. Um, the sun is exalted in Aries. We didn't mention that back when we were talking about the eclipse, but like this is a very powerful eclipse, so there could definitely be some changing, rising, falling and rising of who's got the power, and some kind of collective pushback here. I wouldn't be surprised. But that said, on a very personal level, I think it's Pluto in Aquarius making this hard square combined with Saturn making this gentle sextile. Saturn often is about society. So, where is my place in the world, in society? And, you know, I keep thinking of that quote by, I believe it's by Gandhi. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. But, you know, be the change you want to see in the world. You know, things aren't going to just be a better world because we wish it. So we all have to find perhaps something a little more outside the comfort zone, about where I'm going to take a stand or where I'm going to contribute, or, you know, how do I connect with people and bring my resources forward. Maybe I don't like being part of a group, but it's time that I do. Maybe I don't think people are going to want to accept me, or I'd rather be of service than be in leadership, but like something around that, how I connect with us. You know, often with Aries and Libra, it's me, you. I feel like this brings in more of a collective energy of it's me, us. And how am I going to fit in with what I see as the us? So, are there structures that support my dream, my Piscean dream and ideal, or am I overwhelmed by the structures that are stopping me? Am I with people who I feel connected to, or do I need to find that tribe? But I do feel that this is very significant. These two planets, very heavy outer planets, are hitting it. And I also feel like with Pluto being so tight, that this could also be saying we're starting a bit of an underworld journey, an internal journey, that before we see it happening out on the world stage, it has to happen within. So there's some kind of deep transformation. And with Pluto, it's not light transformation, right? So what is it that I have to let die off? What needs to end? I think that part of this stepping into the 29 degrees of Aries and embracing the me that I am now means I have to let go of who I was. You can't be both. And that can sometimes be hard because sometimes we want both. I want to still be, my mother's daughter, but I want to be my child's mother. And in some ways, we can do both of that. But ultimately, when I think about who I am, standing in my own space. And so this could be saying, stripping off the labels that we got from society and from others, finding people we connect with, and embracing the fallout, for lack of another word, that may ensue. I think stepping into this, whatever I'm hungering for, we might have pursued it sooner if it was easy, but chances are there's some fallout I don't want to pay the price for. And now is the time that, we're going to have to do that. And again, I'm with you. I could say more, but I'll just pause it there because we're going to have chances to talk about this more. Saturn's going to be in Pisces for the next 2.5 years, I think it is. And with Pluto, just pay attention. Where do you have Aquarius in your chart? Because Pluto just entered Aquarius on the 1st of May. She's going to start to retrograde back. By June, she's back into the tail end of Capricorn. We go back and we finish what we need to do in that sign about what do we need to restructure. And then in next year, in January, she comes back and will stay in the sign of Aquarius, as you said, for like 20 years. So we have lots of time to get comfortable with this. Now's a good time to just notice, what is this energy about? What does it bring up for me? Again, this could be a great time for foreshadowing what some of the future work is going to be around.
Yeah. And the last aspect that we wanted to talk about on this episode was who's actually ruling this new moon and what this planet has to say. So the new moon is in Aries, ruled by Mars, and Mars is speaking to that Mercury and Uranus in Taurus. And I just want to go back to what you said about this, this whole thing on a bigger scale. It does have that kind of taste of crises, especially with Mars being in ruling that eclipse and this new moon. And again, it's a new moon, so it's going to be dark. It's eclipse, so again, something might be eclipsed from our view. And we have Mars in a sign of Cancer, where it's super protective of your home. Mars in Cancer is not the typical warrior who goes out and being active. Mars is the one that is a mama bear, or if you ever seen an animal, protecting a female animal protecting her cubs, she's the most ferocious thing ever, because she's protecting her own cubs. And this is Mars in Cancer, that protection of what is dear to you, that protection of your roots, of your home is really important. But also it can be the home in the ideological sense. I'm protecting the conditioning that I got. And that's speaking to that Mercury and Uranus in Taurus. Again, the values that we have. So all that feels a little bit like a match can just set everything on fire. The wrong word, the wrong line, whether again on the world stage or in our personal life, we said something, we misspoke, there was a Uranian moment where, it just came to us, we just said it, and we basically brought up all that protective energy in someone or in us. When we stand up for what we believe, the Taurian thing, and how do we protect our home? And there's so many layers that, people do that. My key thing would be here, again, explore that Aries, and bear in mind it's an eclipse. You won't see the whole story. Kimberly, you pointed out as well that Mercury is day before going retrograde. So again, we will revisit this point again in the future. But we have a situation where going back again to who you are, if you understand who you are and what you stand for, and really look at your wounding and at your core with the courage to strip all the conditioning, all the Cancerian conditioning, you're not going to get that trigger. The other political party supporter is not going to get you triggered. Your mother-in-law is not going to get you triggered. again, I'm probably overreacting here. You still have a reaction. You wouldn't be a human if you didn't, but you're not going to react. You can then respond. And I think the Mars in Cancer is dangerous when we protecting things that been conditioned to us, when we don't even see a whole picture, when we realize that, we feel like our home is under attack, because what's under attack is the conditioning that we got.
Yeah.
Whether it's religious, political, cultural, traditional. Like, can we step away from that and see who I am without that? It's interesting topic, and one that I'm diving quite a lot into it, because I've been raised in certain country, in certain tradition, in certain religion, and then I obviously moved countries and settled in UK. So this is something that is really close to my heart. But this is it. Like, when you step away from your culture, who you are without it, are you still yourself? What is it that, what tradition, what religion, what upbringing is important to your identity and worth fighting for? Whether to, support those traditions, and keep them going, even though you're surrounded maybe by a different culture, or not, or strip them because they are, things from the past. Again, Kimberly, you mentioned that we have the Taurus Scorpio moving away. What can we let go of? But this just feels a little bit too lively for my liking.
Lively is a good word.
Mm.
I think
at least it's not interesting.
Yes, you've
I'm
moved
trying
on.
to find new words.
I think out of everything in this chart for this lunation, the thing that stands out the most for me, and during the month of April, the thing that stands out the most for me is this transit of Mars in Cancer, because it is the ruler of the eclipse, because it is in the sign of Cancer, which is its fall. It is the sign it is the most uncomfortable in, because everything about Mars says, I need to take action, and everything about Cancer says, I need to do it on behalf of the family, the home, like you said, protecting territory. And so that stands out in itself as strong. I mean, whenever Mars is in Cancer, I'm always like, I don't want to be out in the world. I just want to stay at home. I want to nest. I want to make a couch fortress. I just want to hide there. I don't want to be engaged in taking action in the world. So everything in this chart that's pulling me out into the world, it's at kind of cross purposes. But then its only aspect on the day of the eclipse is with a stationed, about to go retrograde Mercury that hasn't moved in like 2 days. It's moved a few seconds. That's it. So to me, this says, what have you accepted and hardwired into your thinking from the conditioning from either your family or your religion or your country or your culture? Or the past, for some of us, the family might have been great, everything's great, but our ancestors came from such and such country and they were poor, and therefore I'm somehow locked into some concept of, scarcity mentality. Like, it doesn't have to be logical. It is totally about the emotions and the connection and the conditioning that we have willingly or unconsciously. So I don't mean willingly like we're participating in it actively, but we are participating because unconsciously we've taken it on. And so I'd say, what is the role that you play within your family or have historically, and how has that become hardwired into our thinking? Because we can change the action we take. I can choose to leave my family. I can choose to leave my country. I can choose to take an action that separates me from this source of, and I'm going to go with pain because we already started off with Chiron, right? So there's something here about, we're not looking at the happy things. We're looking at the more challenging, hard to let go of things. I can take an action, but that doesn't mean I've changed my thinking about it. So if in the family, my job is to be the mediator, and I don't want to do that anymore, and I move cross country, I get a great job, I'm doing whatever, am I now the mediator within that environment? What's happening with my chosen families and my social tribes? Like, I really think here it's about looking at the pattern that we have adopted or accepted, and it's hardwired. So it's hard for us to step out of that, and that's what holds us back. That's the reason it's 29 degrees Aries here, because it's time to rip that Band-Aid off. Or if you're like me, that facial peel. But rip it off and let's move forward. And ow, this feels to me very pushy, very painful, that last step of the journey. And that doesn't mean the whole thing is just going to be awful, because there's also excitement about what we're moving into, right? There's that excitement of being my own person and bringing it forward. But for those who 13 degrees of Cancer, which is where this Mars is hanging out, for those who that is a significant point in your chart, or it makes an aspect to significant planets, I think this can be really kind of like a flash paper. And it can be a good thing. It can be whatever feels like a little crisis is moving me into, I'm finally seeing how I've adopted that thinking. And if it's not the thinking, then certainly, because of Mercury, it could certainly be what is being said to us, what we are saying, how we hear things, how we misinterpret things. I mean, all of that, I agree. I think we could be very easily triggered, very highly sensitized to, but it's because at a deeper unconscious level, I stop myself from being who I am, because I've been conditioned to believe, fill in the blank. And that blank is what we need to see. And often, once we have a conscious awareness that, oh, gee, yeah, I don't believe the same religion as my parents. I haven't for 50 years. But when we kind of see but in that religion, I believe that God didn't accept me, so I feel unworthy. Like when we suddenly see how our mind has worked it in some unconscious way, it's so much easier to let it go, because now we're conscious. Now we've brought it into the light. So sometimes we have to go into the dark to find what's in there. And so things that occur to me that help us change our brain waves, change our patterning, change the way our mind reacts. And I think, to echo what you said, I think the month of April, and especially this eclipse, we really are moving from what makes me react to how can I choose to respond. That is the huge paradigm shift that will happen with this. Yeah. That's my soapbox about the Mars in Cancer.
I mean, that's actually a really great segue to go into tips for this episode. So I actually will have couple. So we start an eclipse season. So I would encourage you to have a look, at your diary, at your calendar, at your pictures from that year. What happened for you between like April 2004 and March 2006, and then October 2013 and March 2016. What themes were coming up around that Aries Libra axis, around relationships, about you and your independence and who you are, discovery of your own self, and then your relationship with others. So that's one tip. Just having a reflection, having a journaling, having that moment to see what might come up. And the second one, again, going back to that new moon and Mars. If you step outside, if you're getting triggered by something, if you getting triggered by different political opinion or by different religious views or something else, maybe having again that journaling exercise, like, why am I getting triggered? What is it about that opinion that is such a core of me that I feel personally attacked? Because this is what the conditioning does for us. It kind of molds us into that person where we feel, if you're not like me, if you don't think like me, if you don't believe in things like me, you're personally attacking me. So are you getting triggered at that level, that reflection? And if you were to step out of that, what would happen? Play with that, have a journal on that, have a moment at that new moon and say, okay, what is me and what is the conditioning that my country, my religion, my ancestry left me with? How do I kind of separate that, and how do I merge that? It's not about stripping all that away. That's not what I'm suggesting here, but kind of having, like what you said, Kimberly, having that understanding that all that is generation of conditioning. of my mothers and their mothers and their mothers. And, it's the religious conditioning, it's the country's conditioning. This all creates who I am. What out of all that mosaic, all those pieces, it's really the core of me, and why? Like, ask yourself this question, why? But go deeper. Ask that question 5 times. If you give yourself answer, ask that answer why. And then again, if you give yourself answer, ask another. Go deeper, 5 times deeper, to get to that nugget of gold of why is it who you are at the core. Why is it that you feel so strongly connected to that conditioning, and what can you do to put the boundaries around that and get to know yourself as you, and keep only what you want to keep, what is valuable and healthy and important, and helps you, create healthy relationships around. So those would be my 2 tips. A lot of journaling, a lot of reflection. Very Aries energy, not.
But very much pulling in that Mercury, right? Mercury,
Yeah.
when it's about to
Yeah.
go retrograde, and while it's retrograde, is so great for reflecting.
Yeah.
My tip is super simple, super practical. We have to be able to take action. If there are obstacles or impediments or overwhelm or societal things or whatever it is that is creating the obstacle out there that's challenging who I am in here, we need to take some action. With all this Aries, we need to be doing. So, thinking about Mars in Cancer, I would say focus on what are some of the things, and maybe even not just for this month, but for this summer. Like, what are the things I can do right now to improve my home, my garden? It can be the smallest little thing. It could be I'm going to do the dishes every night. It could be I'm going to, start a garden. But if you're going to start a garden, break it down to that first step. What can I do right now? What is step 1? And after that's done, then I can figure out what my next step is. So, doing those simple steps so that we are taking action and we are putting energy into the idea of moving. And then following up on that, how can I proactively nurture myself? What do I need right now that would be nurturing? And that's a very unique thing. For one person, nurturing would be, going outside and staring at the stars. For another person, it's a bath. But for other people, nurturing could be, I give myself permission to not do email today. For somebody else, nurturing might be, I'm just taking the dog for a walk. For somebody else, nurturing might be, I'm going to go axe throwing. Fine. Hey, we are talking about Mars. So do what feels right for you, but think about what is one thing I can do today. And maybe you don't have the time to do it today. You'll have to wait till Saturday, but you get the point. What can I do right now? That's one simple step that allows me to nurture myself. What is one thing I can do today that allows me to get into some of that nesting about the house and the yard and nurturing the space where I live? That can help us to step out of defense and protect mode and back into the really harmonious energy of the water sign of Cancer, which is really about nurturing. And I think the rest of everything we talked about is going to happen, whether we do a tip and trick to make it happen or not. I feel like the universe is going to push us and it's going to be what it needs to be. So this might just be a way to handle some of the emotion and adrenaline that comes up with all of that.
A good tip.
As is yours. So, all right, we will see you on the other side. We will find out how the Aries eclipse and all of these interesting aspects have manifested for y'all. And we'll be back to talk about Scorpio, because in 2 weeks we'll be having the Scorpio eclipse and talking about what that has been bringing up, and see if anyone has any I've been experiencing both of them overlapping. So please, please, please comment, share, tell us what you're going through so that we can keep the conversation going.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for joining us in this week's AstroChat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.